Someone you love is going to die. Maybe they already have. And when that happened, or when it happens, you did something strange. You gathered people together. You dressed the body. You said words over it. You buried it or burned it or placed it somewhere specific. You cried in front of strangers. You brought food. You wore black or white or nothing special at all, depending on where you grew up. You did all of this without anyone explaining why. You just knew. But here is what nobody tells you. Every single thing you did in that moment, every ritual, every instinct, every quiet compulsion to mark the death of another person was already old before your civilization existed, before your religion existed, before language as you know it existed. The way you mourn is not a product of your culture. It is a product of your species. And the story of why your ancestors started burying their dead is one of the most unsettling and beautiful stories in all of human history. Your brain does not understand death. Not really. Anthropologist Ernest Becker spent his career on this exact problem, and in his 1973 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, he argued that the awareness of death is the central wound of human psychology. Every civilization, every religion, every cultural practice that humans have ever built is, at some level, a response to the terror of knowing that you are going to stop existing. You carry that knowledge every single day, and so did the people who came before you. Long before they had temples or kings or writing, long before they had words for what they feared. The question archaeologists have been circling for over a century is this: when did that fear become a ritual? When did the simple fact of death transform into something that had to be honored? When did your ancestors stop walking away from their dead and start stopping and staying and doing something about it? The answer is older than you think. In 2015, a team led by paleoanthropologist Berger made a discovery deep inside a cave system in South Africa called the Rising Star Cave. What they found there rewrote the timeline. Deep underground, in a chamber that could only be reached by crawling through passages so narrow that only small researchers could fit, they found bones. Hundreds of them. They belonged to a species called Homo naledi, a hominin that is not quite human but is closer to you than any ape alive today. And crucially, Homo naledi had a brain roughly 1/3 the size of yours. By most prior assumptions, a brain that small should not be capable of processing the concept of death in any meaningful way. It should not be capable of ritual. And yet the bones were not scattered by predators. They were not washed in by floods. They had been deliberately placed there. Deliberately carried through darkness, through tight passages, to be set down in a hidden chamber beneath the earth. Homo naledi was doing something intentional with its dead over 300,000 years ago, and possibly as long ago as 335,000 years, before Homo sapiens existed. Let that sit with you for a moment. The impulse to honor the dead did not begin with your species. It may be older than your species. Something in the ancient primate brain, long before it became the brain you are using right now to process these words, looked at a body that had stopped moving and felt something that could not be ignored. Something that required a response. Something that pulled these small-brained creatures underground with their dead. Now move forward in time. Move to a cave in what is now Iraq, called Shanidar Cave. In 1960, archaeologist Ralph Solke excavated a burial site there that dated back roughly 60,000 to 80,000 years. The skeleton he found, a Neanderthal, was surrounded by dense clusters of pollen. Solke argued that the Neanderthal had been laid to rest on a bed of flowers, hyacinths, groundsel, ragwort, laid carefully around the body before burial. The interpretation has been contested in the decades since, with some researchers suggesting the pollen may have been deposited by burrowing rodents or wind. But more recent work, particularly a 2023 reanalysis published in the Journal of Archaeological Science, found fresh evidence supporting deliberate flower placement. Neanderthals, a species your ancestors almost certainly interbred with, a species that disappeared from the earth around 40,000 years ago, appear to have been burying their dead with tenderness. Think about what that means. It means the need to soften death, to make it beautiful somehow, to put flowers where a body lies, is not a human invention. It is an inheritance. It was passed to you not through culture or language, but through something deeper. Through the architecture of a mind that cannot look at death and do nothing. Your ancestors, your fully modern Homo sapiens ancestors, carried this inheritance and amplified it. They did not merely bury the dead. They began transforming burial into ceremony. The oldest known deliberate human burial dates to approximately 78,000 years ago, found in a site in Kenya called Panga Yaseti. A child between 2 and 3 years old, carefully placed in a pit with their head resting on a pillow. A pillow. The researchers, publishing in Nature in 2021, noted that the position of the body suggested it had been deliberately arranged, wrapped, or placed with intent. Someone had made that child comfortable. Someone who knew the child was no longer there had still made the child comfortable. By 30,000 years ago, burial had become elaborate. At a site called Sungir, in what is now Russia, archaeologists found 2 children buried head-to-head in a single grave. Their bodies were covered in thousands of ivory beads, hand-carved from mammoth bone, strung into garments that would have taken an estimated 10,000 hours of labor to create. 10,000 hours. Someone, or a group of someones, had spent the equivalent of 5 years of daylight labor decorating 2 children who were gone. They carved fox teeth pendants. They placed spears of straightened mammoth bone beside the bodies. They buried a human femur, filled with red ochre, between the 2 children like a gift from one world to another. Why did they do it? Biological anthropologist Barbara King has spent years studying grief in non-human animals, and her findings complicate the idea that ritual mourning is uniquely human. Elephants return to the bones of their dead and touch them with their trunks. Chimpanzees have been observed carrying dead infants for days, grooming them, refusing to leave them. Dolphins circle their dead. Crows hold what appear to be vigils around fallen members of their flock. What you are witnessing in these animals, and what your ancient ancestors were expressing in their burials, is something that looks remarkably like what you feel when someone you love stops breathing. A refusal to simply move on, a need to mark the moment. A sense that the absence of this particular being matters and demands acknowledgement. Your brain, even after all these millennia, has not been updated. The grief response you carry is ancient. The neurological machinery that makes you want to stop, to gather, to do something when someone dies, is the same machinery that pulled Homo naledi into that dark cave in South Africa. It predates religion, it predates language, it may predate your species entirely. But here is where it gets stranger. Recent research into terror management theory, built on Becker's foundational work and developed by psychologists Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Piskzinski, suggests that human cultural life as you know it is, in large part, a defensive response to the awareness of mortality. Your art, your architecture, your religions, your political systems, your drive to leave a legacy, your need for meaning, all of it is shaped, at some subterranean level, by the fact that you know you are going to die and you cannot bear that knowledge without a story that makes it tolerable. The researchers call this the mortality salience effect. When people are reminded of their own death, even subtly, they cling harder to their cultural worldviews. They become more generous to people who share their beliefs. They become more hostile to people who challenge them. Death awareness, the theory argues, is the engine driving much of human social behavior. Your ancestors solved this problem with ritual. They made death into a story. They turned the body into an object of ceremony. They placed flowers and ivory beads and red ochre into the earth and said, in whatever language their hands made, that this person mattered. That this ending was not simply an ending. That there was something worth doing, worth spending 10,000 hours on in the face of silence. And you inherited that. When you stand at a graveside and you do not know what to say, but you are there, simply there, because it feels necessary, you are doing something your species has been doing for at least 78,000 years, and something creatures who shared your branch of the family tree were doing for at least 300,000. The rituals change, the flowers change, the words change, but the impulse, that ancient wordless insistence that a death must be met with presence, does not change. The next time you light a candle for someone who is gone, or lay flowers at a memorial, or simply sit in the quiet after a loss and feel the weight of it, know that you are not alone in that moment in any sense you can easily measure. You are joined by every human who ever lived. You are joined by ancestors who never had a word for what they felt, but felt it anyway. and carried their dead underground to say so. Tonight, when you think of someone you have lost, you will do something. You will feel something. You will be unable to simply let it pass without acknowledgement. And that inability, that insistence on marking it, is the oldest thing about you.